My name's Lena. I'm 27 now, but I still remember the day I realized my cousin Chase never had to fight for a single thing. New cars, private schools, paid internships, everything just landed in his lap. Back then, I thought hard work would even the score. I was wrong. What I found out later changed how I saw family forever. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe for more real stories about family, betrayal, and quiet revenge. The day Chase got his first car, I remember the sunlight bouncing off the brand new silver paint like it was laughing at me. We were both 17. His dad had rolled into the driveway with a bow on top of the hood, the kind you see in commercials. Chase grinned wide, slapped the steering wheel, and said, "Guess I won't be needing the bus anymore." I stood there holding a grocery bag full of discount snacks for my after-school shift, pretending that it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. Our families lived just 2 streets apart in the same small Ohio town. My mom was a nurse's aide, and my dad worked nights at a factory before his back finally gave out. Chase's dad, Uncle Greg, owned a string of car dealerships. We were blood, but we came from different planets. Even as kids, the difference between us showed in the smallest things. Chase wore clean white sneakers. Mine had duct tape across the toes. His mom packed him lunches with juice boxes and name-brand snacks. I ate free cafeteria sandwiches and said they tasted fine. When we were little, I didn't care. He was my cousin, my best friend, the one who taught me how to skip rocks at the creek and sneak sodas from the garage fridge. But somewhere around middle school, everything changed. Chase started acting like kindness was charity. He'd joke about helping me out when he covered my share of a pizza. He'd tell friends I was the hard-working type, the same way you'd talk about someone's rescue dog. I laughed it off then, but the sting stayed. By the time we reached senior year, college was all anyone talked about. For me, it was a lifeline, a way out of long shifts and overdue bills. For Chase, it was just another stage to conquer. I'd study late into the night at the kitchen table, my mom asleep in the next room with the TV still glowing faintly. I'd trace scholarship applications with my finger like they were lottery tickets. Every essay I wrote felt like a plea to the universe. Please, just one chance. Meanwhile, Chase talked about college like it was a vacation. Dad says wherever I go, I'll have wheels and a roof. He'd brag. He liked to joke that his biggest problem would be deciding which frat had the better parties. It wasn't jealousy, at least not at first. It was more like exhaustion, the kind that builds up when you try to be proud of someone who never had to earn what you fight for every day. The acceptance letter came on a Thursday morning, sealed in a thick envelope that felt heavier than it should have. My hands shook as I opened it. "Congratulations, Lena Walker. You've been awarded a full academic scholarship to Brighton State University." I screamed. My mom came running from the laundry room, soap still on her hands, and hugged me until I could barely breathe. We cried right there in the kitchen. For the first time in years, the world felt fair. That evening, I called Chase. "Guess what?" I said, voice trembling with excitement. He cut me off, laughing. "You got into Brighton?" "Me too. And guess what else I got a scholarship to?" For a second, I couldn't even speak. The same scholarship? The same university? It felt impossible. That's great, Chase," I said, finally, but something in his tone, light, careless, didn't match the way I'd felt opening my letter. A week later, our families threw a joint dinner. My mom made lasagna and tried to hide her nerves about money. Uncle Greg showed up with a bottle of champagne and a grin that filled the room. "To our future graduates," he said, raising his glass. 2 scholarships in one family. Must be in the genes. Huh? Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. During dinner, Chase went on about working hard for his grades. My aunt nodded proudly, saying, "We always knew Chase had that special spark." My mom smiled politely but stayed quiet, probably thinking about the extra shifts she'd picked up just to afford my laptop. After dessert, Chase pulled me aside. "Hey," he said, smirking. "You're not mad. We're both going to Brighton, are you?" "Why would I be mad?" I asked. He shrugged. "I dunno. I just don't want you to feel like I'm overshadowing you." The words cut deeper than he knew. I went home that night feeling small, like even my hard-earned success somehow belonged to him too. Move-in day came fast. The air smelled like fresh paint and nerves. My mom drove us in her old sedan packed with hand-me-down towels, a second-hand coffee maker, and my folded dreams in cardboard boxes. Chase arrived in a brand-new SUV. His parents hired movers to unload his things while he strolled around like a celebrity greeting fans. His dorm had a flat-screen TV and new bedding. Mine had creaky furniture and a roommate I'd just met. When his dad handed him a credit card for emergencies, I caught my mom looking down at her worn shoes. She smiled through it, but I could see the worry behind her eyes. That night, as I sat on my dorm bed, I watched the city lights through the window and promised myself one thing. I wouldn't let his privilege define me. I'd work harder. I'd prove that effort still meant something. The first week of classes, I noticed how Chase seemed to float through everything. Professors knew his name already. He joined the debate team without trying out. He made friends with the dean's assistant over lunch like it was nothing. I worked at the campus cafe before sunrise, my hands smelling like coffee grounds by the time I got to my first lecture. I'd spot Chase laughing across the quad, his friends tossing keys in the air, talking about their weekend plans. One afternoon, I ran into him near the student center. "Hey, Lena, you working again tonight?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, tying my apron tighter. "Rent doesn't pay itself." He chuckled. "You should relax more. College is supposed to be fun." That line stuck with me. Fun. For me, fun meant sleeping 6 hours instead of 4. For him, it meant road trips and rooftop parties. Still, I smiled and said, "Maybe someday." A few weeks later, I stopped by the registrar's office to confirm a form for my financial aid renewal. The clerk, a kind older woman with tired eyes, glanced at my file and said, another scholarship student. You and your cousin both came through the donor program this year. That's rare." "Donor program?" I asked. "Yes," she said, flipping through papers. "Private family endowment. Usually goes to students recommended by—" "Oh, never mind, I shouldn't discuss details." My heart started to race. Private donor? I knew my scholarship came from academic merit. There wasn't any private about it. I smiled politely and left, but my thoughts wouldn't stop spinning. Private donor, same program as Chase. That can't be right. That night, lying in bed, I thought about every unfair moment since childhood. The birthday gifts, the easy smiles, the way Chase always landed on his feet. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind. Maybe he didn't earn that scholarship at all. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, something told me the truth had been staring at me the whole time. As I drifted off to sleep, I decided to push it away, to focus on my studies. But once a doubt takes root, it doesn't leave easily. Every laugh, every boast, every story Chase told about his hard work now sounded different, like lines from a play he'd rehearsed too many times. Over the next few months, small cracks began to show. I'd overhear Chase bragging about connections that could make things happen. Once during a phone call with his dad, he laughed and said, "Yeah, I told them you'd handle the donation. No worries." When he noticed me standing nearby, he quickly ended the call. "Just family stuff," he said. I didn't press, but inside, something hardened. I wasn't jealous anymore. I was awake. One snowy evening before winter break, we both stood outside the dorm parking lot, waiting for our rides home. His car idled in the cold air, heat fogging the windows. My mom was running late from a double shift. Chase looked over and said, "Hey, Lena, you ever think maybe some people are just lucky?" "Maybe," I said quietly. "Or maybe some people just have the right kind of help." He smiled faintly, not catching the edge in my voice. "Either way, it's all about how you use it, right?" I nodded, but didn't answer. I just watched the taillights fade as he drove off into the dark. That was the moment something changed in me. Not anger, just a quiet, steady promise. Someday, I'd learn the truth about that scholarship. And when I did, I'd make sure the world saw the difference between luck and lies. I remember the night it all began to shift, not with thunder, not with shouting, but with something far quieter. It was one of those evenings when the world feels still, almost too calm, and your thoughts start whispering things you've been trying not to hear. I was sitting at the edge of my bed, scrolling through social media, watching my cousin Nate's newest post. Another sleek photo of him beside his brand new car. A caption dripping with luxury and effortlessness. "Blessed," he wrote, followed by 100 comments cheering him on. For a few seconds, I stared at that word, blessed, like it meant something completely different for him than it did for the rest of us. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. It was more like confusion mixed with something heavier. Why did everything fall into place for him while I had to crawl just to reach the starting line? I tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself it was just late-night overthinking. But something in my chest wouldn't quiet down. That's when I noticed a new message on my phone, a text from my mom. "Don't forget, Lena, your aunt and uncle are coming over tomorrow. Be polite. Be polite." I smiled bitterly. That phrase had followed me around like a shadow for years. It wasn't a reminder, it was a warning. Because being polite in our family didn't just mean manners. It meant keeping your real emotions hidden behind a well-practiced smile. The next day, the house smelled like lemon polish and roasted chicken, my mom's way of preparing for guests she pretended to adore. Nate arrived wearing designer clothes and a grin that could have sold perfume ads. He hugged me, lightly, barely touching, and then turned his charm toward everyone else in the room. "Guess who just got accepted into Columbia's internship program?" he announced, loud enough for even the quietest corners of the house to hear. My mother gasped. My father clapped him on the shoulder. My aunt beamed. And I just stood there, holding a tray of glasses that suddenly felt too heavy for my hands. "Wow, Nate," I managed to say, forcing a smile. "That's amazing." He didn't even notice the tremor in my voice. Dinner was a blur of laughter and praise. For him, always for him. My father's eyes gleamed with pride as he listened, but not at me. When he finally looked my way, it was only to say, "Lena, you should really learn from your cousin. See how focused he is." That sentence cut deeper than I expected. Later that night, I found myself in the kitchen cleaning up, while everyone else relaxed in the living room. I could hear their laughter spilling through the doorway. My mom entered quietly and started drying the plates beside me. For a few moments, we worked in silence. Then she said softly, "You know your cousin's just lucky, right? Don't compare yourself too much." But her voice didn't sound convincing, not even to herself. That was the first time I felt something inside me shift. A crack in the picture-perfect version of our family I'd been taught to believe in. I realized that maybe luck wasn't the full story. Maybe, just maybe, there was more going on behind Nate's perfect life than anyone admitted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I hadn't before, small inconsistencies. Like how Nate always seemed to have new gadgets but never mentioned working. Or how his parents whispered in the corner whenever finances came up. Once, I overheard my aunt say, "Don't worry, your uncle will handle it. Just make sure Lena doesn't find out." I remember freezing in the hallway, heart pounding. Find out what? But before I could piece it together, Nate appeared behind me. "You lost?" he asked, smirking. His tone carried that familiar superiority, the kind that made you feel like you were standing on the wrong side of a secret. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease lingered. Something wasn't right. Then came the family barbecue, the one that started it all. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and everyone was gathered in our backyard. My dad was grilling, my aunt was fussing over decorations, and Nate was, of course, the center of attention. He brought a girl this time, effortlessly beautiful, clearly impressed by his charm. As I helped my mom set the table, I overheard Nate telling his friends about how hard work pays off and how some people just don't have the drive. His friends laughed, nodding along while I stood there pretending not to hear. That was it, the spark that lit something in me I couldn't ignore anymore. After everyone left, I found myself pacing my room, replaying his words. I wanted to scream, but instead I opened my old notebook, the one I hadn't touched in years. Writing had always been my escape, my quiet rebellion. I wrote everything I couldn't say out loud. Every unfair comparison, every quiet humiliation, every time my achievements were ignored because his seemed louder. But as I wrote, something unexpected happened. Clarity. I realized that my resentment wasn't just about him having more. It was about the imbalance of truth in our family. The way appearances mattered more than honesty. The way his success was worshipped while mine was politely acknowledged and quickly forgotten. A few nights later, fate, or maybe karma, decided to play its hand. My father asked me to drop off some papers at my uncle's office. It was late, and the building was nearly empty. When I reached his desk, I noticed a folder labeled Loan Documents, Nate. Curiosity got the better of me. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Inside were payment receipts, huge sums, all signed by my father. My breath caught. My father was paying off Nate's achievements. I stood there frozen, papers trembling in my hands. My cousin's success wasn't built on talent or hard work. It was built on borrowed pride and hidden debts. That moment felt like the ground splitting open beneath me. Everything I believed about fairness, effort, and family came crashing down. I left the office quietly, my mind spinning. By the time I reached home, I didn't know whether to cry or confront him. So I did neither. I went straight to my room, shut the door, and stared at the ceiling. The first crack in the picture had widened, and I knew there was no way to unsee it. Days passed, but the knowledge gnawed at me. Every time Nate flaunted something new, I saw the receipts in my mind. Every time my father praised him, I felt the weight of a secret pressing against my chest. At dinner one night, I finally asked, trying to sound casual, "Dad, do you ever think helping someone too much can hurt them?" He looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "Like, if they never have to struggle for anything, do they ever really learn?" He frowned. "You're overthinking again. Lena, you always do that." And that was it. Conversation over. Truth buried. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Over time, that crack in our family's perfect picture became impossible to ignore. My aunt started dropping passive remarks about financial stress. My father grew quieter during dinners. And Nate just kept shining, oblivious or maybe willfully blind to the damage behind his glow. One evening, I caught him in the garage, talking on the phone. His voice was low, agitated. "I told you, I'll pay it back. Just give me more time." He turned and froze when he saw me. For the first time, his confident mask slipped. "Who was that?" I asked, quietly. "No one," he said too quickly, shoving his phone into his pocket. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment I saw the truth, fear, guilt, maybe even shame. That's when I knew this wasn't just about favoritism anymore. Something much deeper was unraveling beneath the surface. And deep down, I also knew this was only the beginning. The first crack in the picture had become a fracture, spreading silently through the foundations of everything I thought was real. For a long, breathless second, we just stared at each other. Me clutching the laundry basket I'd been carrying, Nate frozen with his phone half hidden behind his back. His face had lost that polished calm he always wore in public. There it was now, the slightest flicker of panic, the kind people show only when they've been caught. "What's going on, Nate?" I asked softly. My voice wasn't angry yet, just steady, controlled. He forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Relax, Lena. You always assume the worst. It was just a friend from college." Sounded more like someone asking for money. His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't eavesdrop." The way he said it, sharp, defensive, made something in me harden. I didn't bother replying. I just walked away, pretending to let it go, though every nerve in me was buzzing with suspicion. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on my bed, staring at my phone. That conversation replayed in my mind over and over like a looping movie scene. The crack had turned into something bigger. Now, a widening gap filled with lies I could almost touch. The next morning, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her expression unusually distant. Dad had already left for work. The morning sunlight spilled across the counter, painting long golden stripes that somehow made the silence feel heavier. "You okay?" I asked gently. She sighed. "Just tired, honey. Bills, groceries, everything's going up." Her tone wasn't new, but there was something about the way she avoided my eyes that made me pause. I wanted to ask more. I almost did, but the words stuck in my throat, because deep down, I already suspected what the answer might be. Later that week, my suspicions found proof. I was walking past my dad's study when I heard voices. The door was slightly open, and my father was on the phone, his voice low but tight with worry. "Yes, I sent the payment." "Yes, again." "Just tell him to stop spending like there's no tomorrow," Dad said. Then, after a pause, "He's your nephew too, Tom. We can't just let him crash and burn." My heart started racing. I stepped back, quietly pressing my back against the wall, every word sinking into me like ice water. That night, at dinner, I studied my parents. My mom's smile looked forced. My dad seemed distracted, tapping his fork against his plate without eating much. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. "Dad," I said finally, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay at work?" He looked up, startled. "Of course." "Why?" "Just asking. You've seemed stressed lately." Mom jumped in before he could answer. "It's nothing, sweetie. Just adult stuff. You don't need to worry." That phrase, "you don't need to worry," had become the family's favorite way of saying we're hiding something from you. After dinner, when the house was quiet again, I opened my laptop and started searching. If Nate really was in debt, there had to be traces, records, maybe even social media clues. It didn't take long. His perfect posts hid inconsistencies. A new car that wasn't registered in his name, a summer trip that matched the dates of a local event for investors. My stomach tightened. Then, a few clicks later, I found it, a tag post from one of Nate's college friends. "Crazy night last weekend. Still can't believe you dropped $5,000 on that bet." My breath caught. A bet. Gambling. That's where the money was going. Suddenly, everything made sense. The phone call in the garage, the secret folders, my dad's payments. My cousin's luxury wasn't luck. It was a carefully maintained illusion paid for by other people's sacrifices. I sat back in my chair, numb. The truth was ugly. And worse, it was ours. For the next few days, I carried that knowledge like a stone in my chest. Every conversation with Nate felt like a performance. Every family dinner like a play I didn't want to be in anymore. Finally, one evening, I couldn't take it. I went to my father's study, knocked once. and stepped in before he could answer. Dad, I began, my voice shaking slightly. I need to ask you something. Please don't tell me it's none of my business. He looked up from his paperwork, weary. What is it, Lena? Why are you paying Nate's debts? The question hung between us like smoke. His pen dropped. What did you say? You heard me. I found the receipts. I heard your call. He's not using your money for school or work. He's gambling. You're covering for him. He leaned back, eyes closing briefly. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost defeated. It's complicated. No, it's not, I said, my voice rising. You're bailing him out while pretending he's some kind of hero. Do you realize what that's doing to you, to us? He rubbed his forehead. Lena, please. You don't understand. Your uncle. I understand perfectly. I cut in. You're paying for someone else's mistakes because no one wants to admit he's not perfect. For the first time in my life, I saw my father speechless. Finally, he said, it's not that simple. Your aunt and uncle helped us when times were hard. I'm just returning the favor. I stared at him, my heart breaking a little. At what cost? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling felt too close, the air too heavy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nate's smile, my father's tired face, the endless cycle of appearances that kept our family spinning in polite denial. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I needed to hear the truth, directly, from Nate. I found him at the cafe near campus, sitting with his laptop open, but clearly doing nothing. He looked up, surprised when I sat down across from him. Wow, Lena, he said, forcing a grin. Didn't think you drank coffee this strong. Cut it out, I said, meeting his eyes. I know about the debts. His smirk faded. What are you talking about? Don't lie. I've seen the paperwork. The money, the loans, all of it. My dad's paying for your mess. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. You shouldn't have gone snooping. So it's true, I whispered. He didn't reply. Why, Nate? You had everything. Why risk it all? He looked away, out the window where cars passed in slow motion. You wouldn't get it. Pressure, expectations. Everyone thought I was the golden kid. I couldn't afford to fail. So you gambled? I thought I could win it back, he said quietly, but then it got out of hand. Uncle Tom offered to help, said it would stay between us. I never meant for it to go this far. I stared at him, torn between pity and fury. You didn't just mess up, Nate. You dragged everyone else into your mess and let them believe you were flawless. He sighed, shoulders slumping. You think I don't hate myself for it? For a brief moment, he looked human again, vulnerable, even, but sympathy was hard to summon when I thought of my father's sleepless nights, the strain in my mother's smile. You should tell them, I said firmly. All of them. Before it gets worse. He shook his head. No one would ever look at me the same again. I leaned closer. Maybe that's what you deserve. We sat there in silence for a long time, the air thick with unsaid things. When I finally stood to leave, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of protecting lies that weren't mine. That evening, when I got home, Dad was in the living room watching TV, pretending to relax. I sat beside him quietly for a minute before saying, "He knows I know." Dad didn't look surprised. I figured as much. "So what now?" I asked. He sighed. "Now, we hope he learns." And we stopped covering. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I watched subtle changes unfold. My father stopped sending money without question. My mother stopped making excuses. Nate stopped visiting as often. But the silence left behind wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that comes after a storm. The air still heavy, the damage not yet repaired. One night, While cleaning out old boxes in the attic, I found an envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter written in my father's neat handwriting. "Lena," it began, "I know you're disappointed, maybe even angry, but family isn't always fair. Sometimes we make choices out of love, even when they hurt us. I don't expect you to understand now, but one day you will. Just promise me you won't let bitterness change who you are." By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the words. Maybe that was the real truth behind the money. It wasn't about greed or pride. It was about love twisted into obligation, about how people lose themselves trying to keep others afloat. The money might have hidden cracks, but it also revealed what love looks like when it's burdened by guilt. And for the first time, I began to see the bigger picture, not perfect, but painfully real. I sat with my father's letter folded on the kitchen table until the ink blurred under my thumb. His handwriting had always steadied me when storms hit. Now it felt like a map leading nowhere. The truth had settled over the house like dust. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt safe. That evening I went back to the stack of receipts I'd photocopied from Dad's study. I had promised myself I would do something that matched the depth of the injustice, something that would stop the cycle without destroying the people I loved. I told no one. I tucked the papers into a plain envelope, sealed it, then stared at it until the room spun. My hands shook. I could have confronted Nate in a public way, dragged him into a family argument. I could have gone to my parents and demanded an explanation. Instead, something colder took over, the idea of anonymity. If the truth came from nowhere, it might cut cleanly, without the messy loyalties and excuses that always swooped in to save the favored child. Late that night, I drove to a payphone outside the campus library, an old relic, but still functional. My palms were slick on the metal. I made a single call to the university's ethics office and hung up after leaving a short, clipped message. "There's evidence someone received admission and financial support through improper influence. Check donor files and correspondence." I told myself I was protecting the integrity of a system I believed in. I told myself I wanted fairness. Then I mailed the envelope addressed to Office of Admissions, attention, compliance, with no return address. When I dropped it into the mailbox, I felt a thrill like a match strike. For once, I was the one controlling the story. The first ripple came a week later in the form of whispers. It started small, students passing rumors between classes, a headline on a campus blog speculating about a pending review. I watched Nate more closely, searching his face for any sign of panic. He tried to act normal, safer than before, but under the practiced charm, I saw a man learning to balance on a wire. Then the dean called a meeting in the administration building. I stood outside the glass doors while students streamed past, their laughter abrupt against the hush in my chest. A campus-wide email followed by noon. An investigation had been opened into financial awards that may have been influenced by external payments associated with certain applicants. The language was careful, legalistic. It did not name anyone. When the compliance officers requested documents, my anonymous tip became a paper trail. They pulled donor lists, admissions notes, and email chains. They called Nate in for questioning. He sat across from two men and a woman in a cramped conference room, his jaw clenched, sweat at his temples. I watched him over video feed that the administration kept open to students for transparency. He didn't look like the confident boy who swaggered around frat barbecues. He looked small. Word moved faster than I expected. Friends who once waved to me in the quad stopped, eyes diverted. Even the barista at the cafe I worked for muttered something sympathetic and then avoided my counter. Rumors love a body to cling to. This one wrapped around my name in a way I hadn't imagined. Students whispered that someone had snitched. Someone else guessed the snitch lived right in our neighborhood. Another accused the dean of staging a scandal for publicity. The university published a second statement. Until the investigation concluded, affected scholarships would be reviewed and, where necessary, temporarily suspended. My stomach dropped. I'd never meant to hurt innocent people, but the university's policy was clear. Audits mean holds mean financial support might freeze. The next morning, I checked my financial aid account. A hold note blinked back at me like an accusation. Pending audit, it read. My chest clenched so hard I couldn't breathe. I called the financial aid office, explained calmly, and a woman with a soft voice told me the audit was routine, that students often experienced holds during reviews. She sounded rehearsed. I hung up shaking. At diner work that night, I wiped tables with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. My manager noticed and offered a free shift to cover my rent if I needed it, but I waved him off. I couldn't accept charity from strangers while I'd set the machine turning. I worked double the usual hours and tried to eat food that wouldn't stick in my throat. Days became a blur of hearings and hushed talk. The compliance office called me in just to ask basic questions. They wanted to know where I got my information or who I might suspect. I lied. I said I had no idea who would have this kind of influence and that I'd only heard rumors. They thanked me for cooperating and said the matter would be kept confidential. I left the room feeling like I'd handed them the match that would burn my own house down. Then, the campus paper ran a photo of Nate walking away from the administration building, head bowed. Comments flooded in, some angry, some sympathetic. I read them, each one like a tiny verdict. Entitled Brat. What a betrayal. Who paid? I scrolled past, stomach twisting. At the bottom of the page, under the letters to the editor, someone had left a note. If someone knows the truth, speak up. This campus has to be clean. No one knew how the truth would land. When the university announced that Nate's scholarship had been revoked pending further action, my relief was immediate and then empty. I had expected vindication. Instead, I felt hollow, like a room cleared of furniture but not of memories. The pleasant taste of justice soured because I could see the broader damage, parents' whispers, friends' sideways glances, the ripple of humiliation that spread outward from him to the whole family. My father took the phone call with a silence that made the kitchen light too bright. My mother cried into a dish towel. My aunt, who had always maintained the family's poise, refused to speak at all, moving through the house with a careful, measured step as if any misalignment would topple the whole structure. The newspapers outside our small town picked up the story. Local news vans arrived with microphones and heaps of expectation. A reporter knocked at our door when Dad was at work. My mother, exhausted, declined to speak. "We are a private family," she told him, voice tight. "Please respect our wishes." The reporter asked if we knew who had made the report. My mother's eyes flicked to me. For a second, brief, searching, then away. It was a look I would carry for a long time. I had wanted fairness. I hadn't wanted spectacle. As the fallout deepened, consequences reached into corners I hadn't anticipated. The university, completing a wide-ranging audit, flagged multiple awards tied to external donations and recommendations. Their policy required reviewing all correlated grants. It made sense from their point of view. It made sense until it didn't. It meant my own grant, though earned by scholarship based on merit, shared a donor category, and therefore had to be frozen until the review ran its course. I called the financial aid office again and pleaded. "I need to take classes," I said. "I can't afford to lose this semester." The woman on the line spoke slowly. "Students have been affected across several categories. We understand your position, but the audit is university-wide. Many students will experience temporary holds." By the time I hung up, the academic calendar felt dangerous, like a cliff I could easily fall off. Within a week, letters arrived informing me my grant was pending. My scholarship would not disburse until the audit cleared my account. Panic moved through me like water seeping through old wood. Rent was due. My laptop bill was due. I thought of my mother's linoleum shoes and my father's briefcase at the door, and the weight of responsibility pressed even heavier. When I told my father, he looked older, as if someone had cracked him and time had crept in. "We'll figure it out," he said, but his voice was frayed. Without the scholarship money, life would become an arithmetic of impossibility. My double shifts would have to triple. I thought of dropping out, of slipping back into the cadence of nights and plates, and sleep interrupted by worry, the idea of abandoning school, of chasing a result that could have been different, made bile rise in my throat. I had imagined my act of whistleblowing as an arrow that hit its target cleanly. The reality was more like a storm that rocked the entire town and left a path of broken branches. My cousin's fall was not just his, it was cascading. Parents whispered about favoritism, alumni questioned donors, and students wondered if degrees could be purchased. The university held hearings that lasted long into the night. People who had once waved in the quad now stood on steps with signs demanding transparency. One of Nate's friends confronted me outside a grocery store. His voice was low, more anger than curiosity. "Why'd you do it?" he demanded. "Why ruin him like that?" I looked at him, tired. "Because it wasn't right," I said. "Because someone had to make sure the system works for everyone." He spat something I didn't catch and walked away. It felt like everyone was looking for a single villain to blame, and I had stepped into that role, whether I wanted it or not. The family felt ruptured. My aunt refused to join any more public events. My mother stopped taking calls from certain relatives. There were long silences at the dinner table where conversations once flowed. My father drove me to work and sat with me, but his eyes were always scanning the rearview mirror like a man waiting to see if the world had caught up with him. One afternoon, my phone rang and a private number glared at me. I let it ring. Then it rang again. Finally, I answered, voice small. "Hello." A woman's voice, calm but strained, replied, "Lena, this is Karen, Nate's mother." My throat closed. I swallowed. "Yes. I don't want to accuse," she began. "I don't want to cause more pain, but I want to understand who did this." Her tone had that softness that comes before someone breaks down. I found evidence that someone sent documents to the university anonymously. We can handle admission problems, but the shame is it's destroying him. If you had a hand in this, please tell me why. I felt my heart hammering. Her words weren't accusations exactly. They were a plea from someone worn thin by worry. I imagined Nate at a kitchen table, face hollow, and some part of me wanted to crawl inside his chest and take the weight for him. But I also remembered the nights my parents had whispered, the receipts, the phone calls. Justice had a cost, and I was the one who decided to pay it. I didn't tell her. Instead, I said, "I don't know who did it, Karen. I'm sorry this is hurting your family." The lie felt like ash. She thanked me, voice breaking, and hung up. After that call, sleep became a stranger. My dreams turned into small kitchens, hospital waiting rooms, and paperwork. I would wake at 3 a.m, heart racing, imagining a future where I'd be the one ostracized, lectured about ruthless behavior. The community had a way of turning people into characters, heroes or villains, and nuance disappeared under the need for a simple story. Weeks turned into months. The investigation dragged on. Nate's scholarship was permanently revoked, and he left school for a while to help his family. My grant was reinstated months later after the university concluded that my award had no connection to the particular donor issues they'd found. By then, The semester had ended for me, and I had lost a critical stretch of coursework and momentum. I had worked harder than ever to catch up, but momentum is fragile. It does not bend easily back into place once broken. The cost of justice was not only academic. Friends I'd known since freshman orientation treated me with distance. The cafe manager hired someone new for my weekend shifts because my presence drew questions. Even the dean, while polite, avoided me in hallways as if my proximity might reopen the raw wound they were still cleaning. Most painful was the civil strain I felt at home. Family dinners resumed a sort of functional politeness, but the laughter had edges. We learned to dance around certain topics, shifting the furniture of conversation, so no one accidentally kicked a painful truth. Once a week, my father would take longer shifts to make up for lost money. My mother picked up extra hours at the clinic. I watched them move with the tired grace of people who have been asked to rebuild without the proper blueprint. On slow evenings, when the house quieted and neighborhood lights blinked like distant promises, I would sit with my hands in my lap and think about the shape of right and wrong. Had I done the right thing? I had believed in fairness. I had tried to preserve it. Yet fairness had arrived like a thunderclap and flattened more than it fixed. I could not undo it. A while later, Nate called. His voice was softer than I had ever heard. "You know," he said, "I'm trying to get back on my feet. I did a lot of stupid things. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused everyone." His apology was simple, without grand gestures. It landed in me like a small stone in a pond. "I'm glad you're honest," I said. My own voice surprised me by its steadiness. I'm not sure what else to say. We spoke a little longer, not about blame, but about the future, about how to move forward so that pain didn't turn into a lifelong thing. Revenge, I learned, often comes wrapped up with collateral damage. It can deliver truth. Yes, sometimes painfully necessary truth, but its teeth do not discriminate. The lesson clung to me like damp clothes. And yet, even with everything that had happened, I did not regret the moment I decided to act. There was a thin line between preserving fairness and preserving illusions, and I had chosen the harder path. In the end, the family began to stitch itself back together in small, imperfect ways. My parents found new rhythms. Nate started working, small hours at first, steady ones later, learning a different kind of pride. I returned to classes determined to carry the cost of what I had done, to make my choices mean something more than just an anonymous email and its fallout. Revenge had opened a door. Through it, light spilled, blinding at first, then warm. But the light also revealed the mess that had always been there, hidden under years of polite smiles. I had expected a battle with one person. Instead, I found an entire web to untangle. The truth had come with a price. I paid it. The ledger would never balance perfectly, but the account had been settled honestly. Sometimes, late at night when the house was still, I would put my hand against my chest and feel the steady beat there, knowing that no matter how messy, every choice I had made had been mine. The years rolled forward, quietly, almost like pages turning in a book I wasn't ready to read. Life didn't crash or explode after everything that happened with Aaron. It just slowed down. I moved to a small town about an hour away where nobody knew my last name or what my family used to be. I told myself I wanted peace, but some nights peace felt a lot like loneliness wearing a softer mask. I rented a modest one-bedroom apartment above a small bakery. Every morning, the smell of warm bread would drift up through the vents, filling my space before the alarm clock even buzzed. I worked part-time at the local library, a quiet job where the loudest sound was the soft stamp of borrowed books. It was simple, predictable, and for the first time, my life belonged entirely to me. Still, every once in a while, I'd catch a flicker of Aaron's name online. His company was doing fine. His smiling face appeared in community newsletters, charity photos, and small-town features. I'd scroll past before the ache could settle in, telling myself I didn't care, but I always did, just a little. It was a Thursday morning when the past found me again. The sky was pale and quiet, and I was sorting through mail at my kitchen counter, bills, flyers, a grocery coupon, when I saw an envelope with handwriting that made my chest tighten. It wasn't fancy stationery, just plain white paper. But the way my name was written, Lena M. Carter, in that familiar, slightly tilted handwriting, froze me in place. Aaron. My first thought was to toss it. My hand actually hovered over the trash can, but something in me couldn't. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled the letter out. The paper trembled a little as I unfolded it. Lena, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I had to try. I found out things I should have known years ago, things about my dad, about that scholarship, and about what really happened between our parents. I owe you an apology I can't fit into a page. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. There's something I need to show you. Aaron. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the words. They didn't feel real. After all these years of silence, after all the anger, the jealousy, the betrayal, he was reaching out, and not with arrogance or pity, but with regret. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or laugh. For days, I kept that letter on my kitchen counter. Every morning, I'd pick it up, read it again, then place it right back where it was. It felt like a living thing, like if I ignored it long enough, it would crawl away and take the memories with it. But it didn't. The truth was, part of me wanted to know, not just about the money or the scholarship. I wanted to know why my aunt had lied, why my parents never fought harder, why everything had been so uneven for so long. After a week, I wrote him back. The words came slowly, like they were afraid to be said out loud. Aaron, I'll meet you somewhere public just to talk. Lena. I didn't expect him to respond so fast. Within a day, my phone buzzed with an unknown number and a simple text. Saturday, 10 a.m. The Maple Diner. The Maple Diner was one of those places that hadn't changed in 40 years. Red booths, chipped coffee cups, the faint hum of old country songs coming from a wall radio. I arrived early, partly out of nervousness, and partly because I didn't want to look like I was rushing to see him. When Aaron walked in, for a moment I didn't recognize him. He looked older, not just in the lines on his face, but in the heaviness behind his eyes. His expensive clothes were gone. He wore a simple jacket and jeans. But the moment our eyes met, a flicker of the past flashed between us. Years of childhood summers, laughter, and quiet competition that had turned into resentment. He smiled nervously and sat down across from me. You look good, Lena, he said softly. I nodded. You too. There was a long silence before he spoke again. I found something when my dad passed, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Letters. From your mom. My heart dropped. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a stack of folded, yellowed envelopes. She'd written to my parents, asking about the scholarship money, about why it never came through for you. My dad, he never told her the truth. My throat went dry. What truth? Aaron swallowed hard. The money was meant to be split between both our families. But my dad, he redirected it. Said your mom didn't follow through with the paperwork. She did, though. I saw the letters. He lied to her. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I blinked, trying to steady myself. So, all those years, my mom thought it was her fault? He nodded, shame clouding his eyes. And I thought I earned everything fair and square. I didn't know, Lena. I swear I didn't. A wound reopened. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The hum of the diner felt louder now, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of coffee being poured. I stared at him, trying to piece together all the years that had been stolen by that single lie. My mom working double shifts, me skipping opportunities because we couldn't afford tuition, the resentment that had eaten away at me, thinking my cousin had everything while I struggled for scraps. It wasn't just money that had been taken. It was fairness. It was trust. Aaron looked down at his hands. When I found out, I tried to talk to my dad about it before he passed. He said he did what he thought was best for me. But that doesn't make it right. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't think you'd ever want to hear from me again. I took a deep breath. You were right about that, I said quietly. He gave a small, sad smile. Yeah, I figured. Closure or something like it. We sat there for nearly an hour, not as rivals, not as family enemies, but as two people trying to untangle the web that had bound them for years. He told me about his guilt, how success had started to feel hollow once he learned what it was built on. I told him about my small life, about how peace had become something I learned to build from the inside out. When we finally stood to leave, he pulled something from his pocket. A folded check. This is what's left of what was taken, he said, sliding it across the table. It's not about money anymore, but I want to make it right. I looked at it for a long moment, then shook my head. No, Aaron, I think I've finally learned that some debts can't be paid in dollars. He looked like he might argue, but then he nodded. I understand. We walked out together, the sunlight catching on the window glass as we stepped onto the quiet street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel that bitter twist in my stomach when I looked at him. Maybe forgiveness wasn't instant, but it was starting to take shape quietly like morning light creeping through the cracks. The letter that changed everything. A few weeks later, a small box arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a note written in Aaron's handwriting. For the record, I told the board everything. They're opening a fund in your mother's name. I hope it brings something good into the world. Beneath the note was a photo, me and Aaron as kids, sitting side by side at Grandma's porch steps, holding melting popsicles and laughing at nothing at all. For the first time in years, I cried. Not from anger, not from loss, but from release. The quiet kind of peace. Time has a strange way of softening the edges of pain. The past doesn't vanish, but it loses its sharpness. I still live above the bakery, still smell the bread every morning, still walk to work at the library. But now, I keep that photo on my bookshelf, a reminder that even the deepest cracks can be mended, not by revenge, but by truth finally finding its way through. Some nights, I sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the lights of the town flicker below. The air hums with quiet, the kind that comes after storms. I think of my mother, of Aaron, of the years that were lost, and I whisper to myself, we made it through, and somehow that's enough. Years later, I learned that life doesn't always give you the justice you dream of. Sometimes it gives you understanding instead. And maybe that's enough. I used to believe revenge was the only way to balance the scales, that if I could just make Aaron feel what I felt, I'd finally be free. But standing in that diner, watching the guilt in his eyes, I realized something I never expected. Revenge might fill the moment, but it empties the soul. Forgiveness, though, forgiveness builds something lasting. I didn't forgive him right away. Healing wasn't a single sunrise. It was a long, uneven road of small steps, choosing not to check his name online anymore, choosing not to replay the hurt over and over in my mind, choosing to breathe again without bitterness sitting on my chest. My mom used to say that truth always finds its way home, no matter how deep it's buried. I didn't believe her then, not when the lies had stolen our peace. But now I know she was right. Truth isn't loud or dramatic. It's patient. It waits until you're ready to see it. The scholarship fund in her name grew over the next few years. Sometimes I'd get letters from students, young girls who couldn't afford tuition, thanking me for my generosity. I never told them the full story. I just smiled and wrote back, telling them to keep going, to work hard, to never let life's unfairness make them small. Because I knew what it felt like to be small and how much strength it takes to rise from that. Aaron and I stayed in touch, though not often. A few messages here and there. One Christmas, he sent a card that simply said, "Thank you for giving me a second chance to be family." I didn't need more than that. Sometimes closure isn't a long conversation. It's just knowing that both hearts have stopped fighting. Now, when I look back at that younger version of me, angry, hurt, desperate to prove herself, I don't feel pity. I feel pride. She fought through things that could have hardened her completely, but instead, she learned to stay soft, to feel, to forgive. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening to my story, it's this: life won't always be fair. Some people will get head starts they never earned. Some truths will stay hidden longer than they should. But in the end, what defines you isn't what you lost, it's what you refuse to let break you. So, wherever you are watching from tonight, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or forgotten, don't let it turn your heart to stone. Keep going. Keep believing that one day truth will find its way to you too, because it always does.